Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, founder and creator of Unwoke Academy with another Market Minute. This one focused on the markets. What do we mean when we say free market economy? We're going to begin our discussion with something called Reason.com. Apparently that's a website and some form of publication. And ironically, they have a tagline, free minds and free markets. I say ironic because the headline of this article just released this morning, January 14th, 2026, reads Trump versus free markets. That's what initially got my attention. I decided to read the article because, based upon the headline and actually the contents of this article, it is a perversion and inversion of the truth, which brings me to a common expression that's caught on in society today that's very important to know about, and that's something called the inversion matrix. The inversion matrix, I'll sum up in my layperson's terms, as the intention of inverting society, where truth becomes a lie, lie becomes the truth, justice becomes injustice, criminals are viewed as good guys are viewed as criminals, and so on and so forth. We're seeing it playing out right now all over media and the social media in the argument over ICE, which stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is a body of law. It's a law enforcement entity within the United States. They are tasked with upholding immigration's law, which is clearly the law. So people doing the upholding of the law are law enforcement. Oddly, and as part of that inversion matrix, we get politicians and a lot of celebrities who are chiming in and saying the enforcement of those laws is in and of itself lawlessness, which is insanity. That goes hand in glove with something that I refer to as the first iron rule of Marxism, which is to accuse others of that which you're doing while you're doing it in order to create confusion. In other words, as you're doing something wrong, you accuse somebody else of it and point at them in order to create confusion and chaos in the hopes that you get away with it. Which brings us to this Reason.com article, Trump versus free markets. It is an interesting read, and it's important because I believe we should all have a better understanding of propaganda and how it works. I've mentioned a few times in the past that some of the people that I've become friends with have released a series of training episodes on recognizing and spotting propaganda. As a starting point, I suggest heading over to Citizens for Free Speech. It is an organization run by Patrick Wood. It's a spectacular organization. And as an offshoot of that, they have something they refer to as Citizen Ninja. It's citizen activist training. For those of us on our side of the equation, the pro-America, pro-freedom, reason and logic side of the equation, not the emotion-driven extremist far left. So for our side, there are resources available to help understand and create activism in almost unanimously and across the board a more peaceful way than our leftist counterparts. So that's a kind and soft way of saying our side isn't the side that riots and protests and burns things down and stomps and tries to assassinate people and then cheer about it. Our side is the side that likes to calmly debate things and reason things out. Another irony in Reason.com. I don't see much reason for this article beyond propaganda and trying to invert the truth. There's that inversion matrix. And unfortunately, finance and woke Wall Street aren't immune to the whole prospect of inversion matrix, where in the past, it used to be considered beneficial to try to find good companies and fund and sponsor and support them. That's what your 401k or IRA or other type of investment accounts were there for. You were participating in funding companies that hopefully you could see, acknowledge, you might like, you want to encourage them and their financial growth, and maybe, who knows, they might become the next big thing in the future. Well, we've had a massive consolidation over the past 5+ years where a very small number of companies have become dramatically overfunded. I refer to that as the globalist cabal. That's a small number of companies that have far too much power, far too much influence, far too much money, and they have been crushing and strangulating free markets by the collapse of free markets. Well, we now have an environment under Trump where we've got the opposite, and it's refreshing. We see a lot of new business, new economic development. We see the expansion of existing businesses that are finally starting to get some cash and capital back in again. It's refreshing and awesome. And that's what free markets are supposed to do. So if you see an organization or some publication like this reason.com come out and try to convince you that Trump is anti-free markets and that what you saw before under Biden, in particular under Biden, it was horrendously bad. We saw the crushing by overregulation of capital markets and free markets, and the addition of, or I think I'll call it subtraction. It's actually subtraction of DEI, ESG, and all of that stuff as fake replacement analysis for investment due diligence, which is a fancy way of saying how we decide what we should invest in. Instead of using merit, we were using this sort of veneer of fake propaganda in order to make investment decisions. Many Wall Street firms ate it up because they could make big money fast by not having to do a lot of research. That took them out of that role, their customary traditional role of going out and scouring the earth, US and otherwise, for good companies to invest in, and then having to monitor them to make sure they don't go off the rails and watch out for warning signs. When they don't have to do that and they can effectively just put everybody's money, almost everybody, almost all of it, huge proportions, overfunding very few companies, giving them kind of the keys to the kingdom and allowing them to crush their competitors. You have Wall Street firms that could just bankroll huge money by cutting back on the staffing and reporting, investigation, due diligence, and service work that they used to have to do. Now it's returning under Trump. We're finding these investment managers are having to go out and actually do work again, which means boots on the ground. It means investigators looking at companies and looking at their balance sheets and reviewing them and considering whether or not they're actually even legitimate. We saw companies that really virtually were practically non-existent, but they put up a good veneer and said that they were going to be diverse and inclusive and that they were going to check all the boxes with environmental, social, and governance. And they did all those things in very spectacular fashion with beautiful websites, but some of them were barely more than an idea on paper, but received massive funding. That's not actual due diligence. That is crony capitalism and mass corruption. So under Trump, what we're seeing is exactly the opposite of what this article infers. Or actually, it kind of outright says it. We are seeing a return to capital markets, which actually represents a threat to the globalist bubble. That gets me back to the episodes where I've said, watch out. I believe that as a political tool, it's very likely that the people that hold the levers of the value on that small number of companies, and I call them 30-ish, and they're the usual players, Amazon, Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, a bunch of the big pharma companies, they got overfunded. I make the argument that they were overfunded during that period of time where all they really had to do effectively was check boxes and put out to the financial marketplace that they were woke, for lack of a better blanket term to use. That's as it's unwinding and as money is starting to go back and flow out of those companies and into real free markets, we're seeing great things happen. I've commented regularly over the past about a year on one portfolio in particular for somebody who joined the financial PMA. I happened to do the trades on her account on October 8th, 2024. And through most recent look, her returns in that portfolio were 57.2%. That's huge. And I believe that is representative of actual due diligence. So rather than go in some woke mutual fund that claims that it's sustainable or inclusive or something, and then finding out that under the hood, that mutual fund is invested in virtually the same investments that most every other mutual fund was invested in. Those funds under Trump, I think they're having a difficult time extracting themselves from those positions in timely fashion. They have such huge overinvestment in those few companies that it's going to take a long period of time for them to sell off shares and then right size and reformulate their approach to investment management. Yes, there is a huge argument to be made there, and I'm one of those people beating the drum, that they have violated their duty to you, the investor. That's a topic for another conversation. Ultimately, when it comes to propaganda in this inversion matrix, by the way, I do suggest looking that up. I think you'll find some interesting content on that inversion matrix. It is an important concept to know, and it's important to recognize when we're being manipulated and propagandized, and critical to your pocketbook, your purse, your wallet, your financial statement, your 401k, your IRA. Please know that the propaganda absolutely takes a huge part in the financial world. The more you know, the more armed you are, the better you can do, and the better you're going to survive and weather the storm, if I'm right about the globalist bubble and the intention to use that as a leverage tool against President Trump and this administration in this year, 2026. I'm predicting that. It's important to note that these are not investment recommendations. This is simply sharing a glimpse of what we're doing at Unwoke.Academy to expose the woke left influence on the world of Wall Street and other financial institutions, but also to scout and uncover more realistic, more properly vetted investment opportunities that aren't woke. Please remember to like and share this video, comment if you're so inclined. You can email questions or comments to Jonathan, Jonathan, at unwokeinvesting.com. If you are in a position to support us financially, we would greatly appreciate that. We are entering our 6th year of battle against weaponized regulators who would like nothing more than to silence my voice. Your financial support helps to put together programs like this one, which I hope you enjoy. This has been another Market Minute from Unwoke Academy.